Oh, good. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. You're I think we're in kind of similar like weather arrangements, are we not?
I am in Niagara on the Lake, Ontario, Canada. So
Yeah.
we get snow in winter 3 months out of the year.
Okay. Yeah, we're in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so we're right on Lake Michigan, so we get all of that awesome
Ooh.
lake effect.
Yes, I have been in Grand Rapids when it was not so nice. Right on
Nice.
the lake. Yeah, it'll get you.
Right on the lake. Yeah.
We Buffalo, which is 30 minutes from us, gets like the dramatic winter storms. So the
Yeah.
other week when they got 6 feet, we got 6 inches, even though it's only 30 minutes away. We don't get the lake effect. We have this like unique climate that's kind of its own thing that's protected from all that.
Yeah. So like if you go north of Grand Rapids to Traverse City, they're like on the bay. So it's like they get more snow than we do in Grand Rapids because they're north, but like they don't get like the massive dumps that we get because their bay kind of protects them, I guess. So it's
Hmm.
always very strange.
Yeah, it can
But
be so localized, even though it's close.
yeah.
The world,
But
wild.
I just bought this nice Milwaukee hoodie that's heated, so I just like click a little button and it turns on a heater for me, so it's quite nice.
A heated hoodie. I don't own anything like that. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, you should go pick one up. You'd probably love it.
Make it a Christmas last minute Christmas gift item.
Yeah. All right, so obviously my audience is drastically different than yours. So I guess I'll just kind of start off with some personal questions for you and just
Sure.
kind of we'll just kind of go from there if that's cool.
That works.
Cool. So I guess let's start here. I listen to your podcast and I hear some bits and pieces of your background. I believe you started off as a worship leader and then kind of transitioned to the tech person that you are now. Is that accurate?
I have my degree in youth ministry. So
Okay.
went to school for that to be a student pastor, internship in my third year of college, and that's where I got put in charge of media under the official title media director at a new church plant. And that's when got a camera, MacBook, and they basically said, "Hey, there's a lot of creative stuff we want to do at this church plant. And you look young, so why don't you just pick it up on the fly?" And I didn't really have any pre-existing skills at all, but the senior leadership at that church was very empowering and had faith in my ability to learn on the fly. And so I started picking up these skills. And because I had no pre-existing knowledge, I figured, hey, if I can learn these things, so can other people. And that was the impetus for the company, Pro Church Tools, for the YouTube channel, podcast, social platforms, and basically just teaching everything that I was learning, which eventually translated into an actual business with products and employees and all the stuff that we have now.
How long did that kind of take, like from the time that they were like, "Hey, Brady, you're young, have this," to like the time where you're like, "I need to start Pro Church Tools and Nucleus and all that kind of stuff."
I mean, it was quick. So I think I said third year I was hired. It was actually second year. So I started in second year, and then I do that year two and year three of Bible college, and then start the company in year four.
Okay.
And because again, like I wasn't coming from the perspective of I am an expert and I am going to now disseminate this information to those that need to learn from me. It was like, hey, I know nothing. I'm learning on the fly. I look around in my Bible college. This is 2010. And I, growing up on social at that point in high school, I'm like, okay, this is going to, like, the internet is going to become so much more pervasive in our lives than it already is. And I see all of my peers in Bible college. And I'm like, y'all are going to be put in charge of the same things that I am because we're young. And it's like, hey, we don't have a social person, but you're the new worship pastor, the new youth pastor, whatever it is. You also do the Facebook page, which was the
Yeah.
biggest thing back then. And so I'm just like, man, like no one's talking about this because it's so new. And
Right.
people in positions of leadership in church, mostly older, haven't had to deal with this their entire careers in ministry. And so there was this sliver of time there where I, kind of filled that gap, that lack of knowledge, and just start teaching everything.
Yeah, it's kind of like the old school thought process of the worship leader always gets stuck in charge of the AV because it's like, well, your pedal board has blinky lights on it, and this
Hmm.
has blinky lights on it, so you should be in charge of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I
Uh,
interestingly, I had to sell my pedal board to finance the engagement ring that I bought my wife in between second and third year. And that's why I started the company in fourth year. I was like, I had sold all my music gear. I couldn't sell any more music gear to fund any more ventures. So I had to start making some money myself.
yeah, no, that's good. So one of the topics that I always like end up talking with people about is, or that they come and ask me is, they say I can't get my pastor to, and this has changed a little bit because a pandemic has kind of changed this, but like we want to be online, we want to do things, and that's not just live streaming. Like they want to start creating podcasts and doing shorts, and they can't get the pastor to see the value. Like what do you tell people? Like what guidance do you give them to try and convince their pastor that this is an important thing?
So we always instruct people to focus on the mission that the church has. And the thing of being a senior leader is that people are always coming to you and saying, "Hey, we should do this. You should do this. We need to do this." And a senior leader's plate is already so full with all of the things that they need to consider. And they never have enough time to do everything that they want. And a
Right.
senior leader might even agree with most people that come to them and say, "Hey, we should do this. You should do this. We got to do this." But it just might not be realistic for them to accomplish that with all the responsibilities that they already have. So, what we suggest, especially for people that are leading from a place that is not senior leadership, so you're leading from like below, how
Right.
does that actually get done? You first go to the senior leader and you very clearly articulate the vision that they have already cast for the church. And so you go and say, "Hey, pastor, like, I know your vision for our ministry and for our church is X, Y, and Z. And I have a project in mind that I think can help us accomplish this mission." And so already there, you're positioning this idea, this passion that you have as a means for fulfilling the mission of the church. So it's not a you thing. It's not just something that you'd love to be in charge of to feel great about yourself. It is for the express purpose of accomplishing the mission of the church, which is not some groundbreaking idea, but it is so uncommon for a person in church, whether on staff or a parishioner, to come to a senior leader and first articulate the vision for that church and then say, "Hey, here's how I think we can accomplish that." That is virtually unheard of. So you do that and you've already kind of positioned yourself in a unique way to at least be heard by your senior leader. And you also demonstrate that you understand what matters most to the church, because this isn't just a tactic to get what you want. It's truly important because at the end of the day, the mission of the church, what you're trying to accomplish, how that gets measured, that is the most important thing. And so you start there. Then what you want to do is say, "Hey, here's the vision, the mission, here's the project. I think that we can like do a test version of this project or do a low cost version of this project. It's not going to require anything. I don't need any of your time. I don't need any budget, and I don't need any new gear. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to figure it out. I just need you to be okay with me doing it." So now you're not saying, "Hey, give me a couple $1,000s to get this project going. Give me some of your time. Give me some volunteer creative resources." No, no, I'm going to take
Yeah.
care of it. Just, are you cool with it? Sign off. Great. And then you come back to them, demonstrate with what we call the three S's: stories, stats, and steps. Demonstrate that you were right, that this wasn't just an idea that when you tested it in the real world, dude. So, stories. This is anecdotal evidence. And the reason we do three S's is because every senior leader is going to respond differently. I'm a very empirical person. So, if you come to me and go, "Wow, you know what? We did this thing and there was this one person and it changed their life." I'm like, "Great. I'm so happy for that one person." If we're going to do this, though, and invest resources, does this work at scale? Because we can find an anecdotal thing for
Yeah.
anything that we do. That doesn't mean it's going to be an effective or good way of stewarding our resources. But
Yeah.
stories, it's a great one. Stats, here's the empirical evidence. Steps, here's how we can do this again. And then you kind of present three different options. And so we say there's the kind of really budget option, which we probably frame to our senior leaders as, "We can do this. It'll cost not that much, but it's really going to hamper our hamstring our ability to do this well. For a little bit more money, we can dramatically increase our ability to execute on this. So it's twice the cost, but it's 5 times more effective. It gives us a lot more capacity. And then you also want to say, and then there's the expensive option, like dream solution. It's like 10 times more expensive, but truthfully, it's only like 2 times more when it comes to return
Right.
on investment. And what you're doing there is, and what's important is doing this with integrity and honesty. You're not just doing this to like position your offer as like a good, reasonable decision. You're saying,
Right.
hey, look, I'm not asking for the best of the best, but I also don't want to do this with just an iPhone, let's say. If we can just get a little bit better than the worst of the worst, we can kind of like split the difference between a little bit more in cost, but almost like 80% in terms of capability with this gear. Sure, sure. There's an extra 20% to be gained, but it's also like, 10 times more expensive. So I know that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but that is the entire process that we recommend. And it was actually taught to me by a lead pastor that taught me that.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you should teach others this, because when people come to me like this, one, it never happens. And two, when it does, I want to work with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because like when you do something and you're never sure if you did it the right way, and then you talk with someone like yourself and you're like, oh, thank God I did do it the right way. Because I remember the church that I was on staff at in like the 2010 to 2015 era. In about 2012, our college ministry was starting to kind of blow up, and we had like 150 people or so in it. And I wanted to get online because like the church didn't have a YouTube channel yet, and it was like there was only a handful of churches, like I think Elevation, Hillsong were on there, but like it wasn't like it is today. And I was like, hey, I really think that it would be good because our main sanctuary was live streaming, and they were on livestream.com or something like that. And I was like, I really want to get our college ministry stuff online. Like that's the demographic that's on YouTube to begin with. And so we had the first gen Blackmagic cinema cameras, the square ones that you
Oh
slide the full
yeah,
size SSD in
I
for
had that
like
one
shooting
too.
like
That was a game changer.
yeah, the 2.5K. Yeah, it was awesome. So I was like, hey, I want to buy the 70 to 200 millimeter EF lens, and like let me just start recording them and then posting them, and we'll kind of see where that goes. And they were totally cool with it. So I did that for a little bit. We got probably between 500 and 1,000 views on most of our stuff, over a course of like 30 days,
That's
just from
awesome.
sharing it. Yeah, it was great. It was a super, super cool. So then the next step was I ended up getting the first gen Blackmagic television studio, the gray one that's like super thin, that's rack mounted. And
Of
we were able
course.
to start live streaming onto the church's website. And then we were starting to rival the main sanctuary's view count online because like online still wasn't like massive at that time. So that was when they were like, okay, cool, we can start buying some cameras, and we started getting some headsets, and they let us buy some lights, and it was just kind of like this process
Hmm.
of like, like let me try this, and then let's add to it, and then let's add to it, and then it was like, okay, why are we not doing this in all of our rooms for all of these different ministries, and that kind of stuff. So it's cool, like being able to go through the process that you just said without even knowing it. So I'm glad I did it.
Nicely done. See, sometimes it just comes naturally to some people.
Yeah, yeah. Um, you said something in there that I was gonna mention. Um, yeah, so like that like initial like because a lot of these churches don't have the ability to go, hey, listen, like we don't have any like I don't have any money to like not like to go to the pastor and say, hey, it's not going to cost you any time, it's not going to cost us any money, like we're going to do something. Like what do you suggest to those people in those moments? Like do you suggest the, hey, can I spend 500 bucks to see if this will work before we spend 20 grand, type thought process? Or like, and then because then that shifts into that, like you were saying, here's the cheap cost, here's what I want to do, and here's the like the dream one. Like what do you do in those moments? Because like I deal with a lot of churches that are like the pastors are just like no, like even the pandemic they were like nope, I'm gonna sit down with my phone, I'm gonna record it, and like that's it. And like as soon as they were able to meet in person again, they stopped doing it online, and they want to meet in person, and they think that online is too disconnected from what they want to do, and they want to be in person. Like what do you suggest to those people?
Oh yeah, so many different options. I have a video on YouTube called "Why Live Streaming is Overrated for Churches," and my perspective on live streaming is a lot more nuanced than a lot of people expect, based on my
I actually
profession.
did a review of your video and I was very frustrated with you, but now have come to be on the same
Really?
page as you.
Wow. Did you do like a YouTube video where it's like a reaction video?
Yeah, so me and one of my partners that does the podcast with me, his name is Sean. We actually sat down and watched your YouTube video and paused it and talked about all your points, kind of as we
I
talked
feel
about
like I
it.
saw that. Did you
Um,
send it to me? Maybe someone sent it to me.
maybe, but I got a little heated a couple times,
I feel
and
like
I
I
know
remember
you.
seeing this and I was like, damn, these guys are kind of like, I don't think they're hearing me at all, which is okay. Look, when I make a video like that, there are several opinions that I have that are like very against the grain of my industry. One, like I think church apps 98% of the time are
Yeah,
more harm than help. Live streaming, I think, is a huge uphill battle that I'm not going to win. But again, I would recommend like 90% of churches not live stream and invest those time and creative resources and money elsewhere if it was me. And then third, there's an online giving conversation that's a lot more in depth that we can,
yeah,
save for another time. But back to the original question of how I would come at that. The reason I mentioned that YouTube video is because, like, on the list of things that a church could do in the world of digital, live streaming is pretty low on my list of priorities.
hmm,
And so if I was dealing with a pastor and they were like, yeah, I did the thing on my phone because I had to, and now we're done with that. To me, I wouldn't necessarily receive that as a person who's resistant to digital. They might be resistant to a certain expression of it. And who knows, maybe him and I, her and I are aligned on that resistance to that specific expression. So the way we
yeah,
talk about it in our company is, look, your week has 168 hours, and Sunday is going to be 1 hour out of 168, which means there are 167 other hours beyond your Sunday service where you can reach people with the good news, where you can connect people, where you can engage them with spiritual practice, where they can be taking next steps. So, what I would do in that instance is I really want to understand where this senior leader is coming from, because it's easy to hear them be resistant to a certain expression of online and then interpret that as they just think this is all worthless, which may be the case, but I think in most instances would not be true. So I would come to them and say, hey, look, my belief, which is motivated by scripture, is that we should be going into all the world to reach people. And
hmm,
I think our mission can be fulfilled in those 167 hours, just like it can be fulfilled in that 1 hour on Sunday. I'm not suggesting that one is more important than the other. I'm not suggesting that online and in person are not very different, because they are. And I think they each have a unique and different role to play. And there are things that in person can do, Pastor. I agree with you that online cannot do, nor should we attempt to do them.
yeah,
But what's also true is that online can do things that in person cannot. So, what specific expressions of online are you okay with? Do we have a website? Yeah. Okay. So clearly there's something about digital that you're
yeah,
okay with. And so I would start to kind of like focus on like, what do we have and why do we have those things? If the answer is just, well, everyone has a website, then great. We can interrogate that a lot more and get it down to an actual value and not just what I call the follow the leader trap, which is, well, we all have those things, so we must do it. Get to the actual value. What is the shared value that this senior leader has and I have? Because once we understand that shared value, then we can talk about different expressions of that value. And we're coming from a much deeper place, which is our conviction, our understanding of scripture, our understanding of ecclesiology, which is so much more robust and substantive than let's get this camera over this camera. There's a lot of place for tension to exist in those conversations. But if we can break it down to the core values, find the common ground, then we can start to problem solve in ways where we're coming at it from the same angle.
yeah. And so the way that I've convinced some people is I remember I think it was maybe the 2016 election here in the States. Joe Rogan had Bernie Sanders on, and he made the comment about how like, hey, like I want to have these political figures on my podcast because when they're trying to give you the example of what they want to do with the healthcare system, and you have 13 seconds to explain the in-depthness of that, you like there's just no way for you to do that. So having you on this long format podcast and giving you an opportunity to explain your ideas and why you feel the way you feel, I started to think through that and I was like, how many pastors are up there on Sunday morning giving a sermon about, blank topic and they have 17 pages of notes? And I'm like, why can't you? And I did a video, Why is the Church Not on YouTube? And I was like, on Sunday morning, you only have that 30-minute ish block of time to try and convey a point that you're trying to get to your congregation. Why not move on Monday morning, sit down with your phone on your desk and go, hey, there's some more details that I didn't have the time, or it wasn't the same kind of format that I could say these kind of things in and make the rest of my sermon make sense and give some more points, and then have that content be your online content, because that can be a 10-minute clip, a 15-minute clip, where, that can also be in podcast format, because it's like, I love like those 10-minute podcasts that I can listen to on my way into work, because the average commute's like 10 or 15 minutes, and like give people some of that kind of information. So that's kind of the way that I've kind of convinced people to go, oh yeah, we need to get more online content, even if it's just like that simplistic thing, because 90% of people have this in their pocket, and it has a better camera than most pros did 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's wild.
So
Now
yeah.
that's a different approach that can also be effective, which is you are solving a problem that already exists in their life.
Right.
So you're meeting them where they are and saying, hey, I actually have a solution for this challenge that is frustrating for you. I think that is a perfectly acceptable approach as well.
Yeah. And then because that can be the snowball effect. Like when that shows fruit, and it's
Exactly.
like when you look at like the average church is like 120 people. And if you can start like, because my church that I go to now, like I go to a much smaller church now, and I think we have about an average of like somewhere between 40 and 60 people on Sunday morning. But like our online sermons get within the first 2 weeks, usually about 80 views.
Wow.
And yeah, which is crazy. But we spent a lot of time like really pushing our media. We started a
Mm,
midweek podcast where we dig a little deeper into what, and it's not our pastors, it's like people from our congregation. And those
that's so
usually get
cool. I
anywhere
love
between
that.
50 and 100. Yeah, and it's like we rotate through. So it's like we have a host, and then it's like every podcast is a different person from the congregation. And it's like, what, when they said this, what do you think? Because we also don't have a senior pastor. We have like a speaking panel. So it's like every
Hmm.
week we have a different speaker. So it's really cool. And we call it Deeper. And that's been really fun. But kind of segueing into what we're talking about, the live streaming stuff, my my question pre-pandemic to clients, because I'm an integrator as well, and so when I would have churches come to me and say, "Hey, we need live streaming set up," I would ask the question of like, "Well, what is the goal? Like, what are we trying to reach?" Because if you want to be online so that the 3 people a year that are sick can watch, let's just simple camera with an XLR audio input and leave it there. We don't need to spend a bunch of money. If we're trying to maybe be, give people that are coming and looking at our church like an idea of what the service looks like. We want it to be a little bit nicer. Is different than, hey, we're trying to like make this look great and we're trying to reach people globally. Like there's a significantly, different approach to all those different things. And so when we start to talk about what it looks like to sit down and film, say, a podcast, most of the equipment you need to film a podcast is equipment you need to live stream. So why would you not live stream on top of doing that podcast if you're already going to invest a majority of the equipment already? What would you say to that? Would that change your mind in that scenario?
Well, I think making like efficient use of the gear we have is always something to strive for. I would say I have not yet encountered a church that had priority number one of video midweek podcasting before live streaming their Sunday service. So,
That's a
in
good
this
point.
particular conversation, yeah, this particular thing, I can't really say I've ever encountered that. Um, if it did happen, I mean, practically, I guess you got to reset up all the cameras and everything like that. Which if you imagine doing that every week for years on end, like okay, that might be a bit of a hassle over
Yeah.
time. I got to reframe everything. And now the framing is not as consistent. And there was that one week where it was completely off
Right.
because it did get moved. I mean, you think about like some logistic stuff like that.
Yeah.
But big picture, yeah, making efficient use of gear is always good. That's why generally, and also because of the world that I come from, I typically recommend churches go with cameras that can excel in both live production, but also in more narrative
Yeah.
stuff. Like, oh yeah, I want a camcorder because I want a 20x zoom, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand that. I would probably put that lower again on the priority list.
Right.
Prioritize a camera that can do all the things, but that's also not the perfect solution for everyone. So I get that.
Yeah. So, all right, so let's move into the next topic here, which is kind of similar. It's funny, when I emailed you your podcast that just came out yesterday on December, oh, not yesterday, 2 days ago, on November 30th, you guys actually kind of talked about, you and Alex talked about this question that I wrote down a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
So it's kind of fun. I watched, I don't remember what podcast it is, but Mr. Beast was on it. And he said that he thinks that in 2023, TikTok is going to die. And he thinks that TikTok's going to die because YouTube Shorts is going to start rev sharing. And because their rev share is so much better, and technically YouTube is currently still significantly larger than TikTok is, that's why he thinks it's going to, because all the creators that are trying to be on TikTok because they're not getting rev share on Shorts will move to YouTube because they have better rev share. Because he made some sort of comment about how he has 3 of the top 10 most viewed TikToks of all time, and he's only made like 10 or 15 grand off of each one. But like with significantly less views on YouTube, he'd made like $100,000, and that's gonna drive people to go to YouTube. I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
do you know how he defined die when he said TikTok's going to die?
He didn't say, like, he didn't go super into detail, and I didn't get to listen to the whole conversation. I mean, I'm assuming that he's not meaning that it's just gonna not exist. It's not like, oh my gosh, what's Vine? Like, it's just like people are gonna stop using
Sure.
it. I think more so like, if I had to like make an assumption of what he was meaning by that, is that when you see a mass exodus where it's like people are not paying as much attention to it, it's still going to be popular, but like it's not going to be everyone's go-to. Like you're going to see a bigger shift.
Yep. Oh, I have so many thoughts. So the first is I don't think we've ever seen a mass exodus on social that I can remember. What we have seen are generations turning over and new generations not latching on to the previous generation's social. So we saw that with Facebook, right? Facebook
Yeah.
kind of ages out and now young people aren't creating accounts there. So we never saw a mass exodus. Facebook lost momentum because it couldn't pick up on the next generation. Snapchat, no mass exodus, but just as it was about to kind of reach that top tier status amongst the major social platforms, it gets undercut by Instagram stories. And so you have all these 30 somethings or late 20 somethings that were about to go over to Snapchat that had kind of been holding out. And then the feature that Snapchat had popularized got introduced to their already like their social platform of choice already. So now they don't feel incentivized to move over. So assuming the quote was in 2023 TikTok will be dead, I don't really care how you define dead. That doesn't seem possible whatsoever because users of social platforms don't leave platforms they're already accustomed to using.
Right.
Creators might. So if you told me that over the course of 5 years, there was a mass exodus of creators, which then via trickle down affected the end users because the quality of their For You page started to diminish. And over the course of 5, realistically, sure, that could seem possible to me. In a year, no, no way. YouTube Shorts, though, very interesting. YouTube has been the major social platform that has been very resistant to new features. And even when
Yeah.
it does introduce new features like the community tab or stories, it doesn't really give it that much priority or focus. You think about Instagram, Facebook, when they release a new feature, they're like, please use this. And if you do, we'll give you a ton of organic reach as an incentive. YouTube's like, yeah, we introduced stories. If you use them, no one's going to see them. But if you want to use them, they're there. But also, we don't really care about them. Shorts is the first thing that I can remember that they have put significant resources behind. And their rollout has been very sloppy on Shorts, I would say. but you can tell that they care about it. And they care about because they're putting money behind it. And the director of Shorts, I think his name is Todd Sherman, kind of came out and was like, hey, we're seeing massive growth on here. And they did introduce the Rev Share partner program that is so famous with YouTube on Shorts. And here's what's interesting. The YouTube Rev Share program, which is in a class of its own, no one gets close to it, which is why so many creators love YouTube, is 55% to the creator, 45% to the platform. With Shorts, YouTube inverted that. It's 45% to the creator, 55% to the platform. And I think a big reason for that is because of the discovery algorithm of TikTok and Shorts. It's very kind of like, hey, you get a lottery ticket, you might win. Whereas social graph algorithms, which is how YouTube kind of was before, is you build this subscriber base. And so when viewers return to your YouTube videos, it's because you've built that audience. And so you've kind of earned that 55%. Whereas with Shorts, it's kind of just roll of the dice. At least that's how it's been typically. And so they've inverted it 45, 55. Facebook and Reels, Facebook and Instagram Reels have also introduced their own partner program. And Facebook followed the YouTube model on Facebook Reels 55-45 in their beta testing. Doesn't mean they'll roll it out for everyone, but they followed that YouTube model, which I find very interesting, that even Meta is like, look, if we want to survive and thrive in the long term, we have to incentivize. And by incentivize, organic reach is not going to be enough. Hard cash, pay out to creators so that they'll continue to use our platform. So those are kind of some of my big picture thoughts. Easy answer to the question, will TikTok die because of YouTube Shorts? No, I don't see that happening whatsoever.
No, that's good. No, I appreciate that. I think for me, for Facebook, I think the biggest thing that like frustrates me about them is that I can't search for something. So like if I watch and see a video from like say you, but I don't know who you are, and then like I can't find it again and I forgot to share it to someone and I'm like, oh, there's that guy that was talking about this thing. Like on YouTube, I can go and type in some of the things you talked about, and my chances of stumbling across your video or your short or whatever are significantly there because it's a search engine. Like I think that's the biggest downfall for Facebook video that I have, is just like it's hard to re-find something that you
Yep.
didn't like save or something like that. And I think that that's going to be their biggest hurdle personally. Until they can fix that, they're never gonna fully compete with YouTube.
That's a great point. And TikTok has a very good search engine as well. I have been in that same situation where I'm like, oh yeah, man and goat and like kick. And it's like, oh yeah, there's the video. That's the exact one that I wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
You do that on Facebook and yeah, 0% chance. And Facebook and Instagram have a huge uphill battle because they're so bloated and they have
Yeah.
so much on the platform. It's like, turning around a cruise ship. Like if you want to pivot in that way, yes, you can invest billions and you can put money behind these decisions. And clearly you're betting a ton on this, but that doesn't make it any easier of a task. One more thought I also had on the TikTok versus YouTube thing. TikTok did recently pass Netflix as the second most popular app in the US in the under 35 group. Number one, still YouTube. So Mr. Beast is right in that like YouTube still holds that number one spot. And I'm definitely not challenging that statement whatsoever. But for TikTok to overcome Netflix, that's noticeable.
Yeah, and I'm curious about that because like Netflix keeps raising their prices and they just had to come out with their new version. So it's like I'm curious how much that plays into that versus like the
Have you
actual
seen
content from the platforms.
Have you seen Netflix's experiment with vertical video?
I have not.
I just saw it yesterday. On their mobile app, they have these things called clips now. So a
Okay.
lot of their comedy stuff has this. It's like, hey, we'll show you a 60-second vertical video excerpt of this stand-up show. And if you want to watch the whole thing, we have it. But here's a 60-second clip, and it's a very similar interface. So now you don't just have vertical video,
That's
every social platform embracing it. You now have like crossovers into, well, that's not a social platform, that's an entertainment platform, which is what TikTok's like their leaders have always said. There was this big piece. I think it was in was it in the Atlantic? It wasn't in the Atlantic. Another big major publication, and they were talking about Facebook and how they were taking on TikTok, and TikTok was like, we're an entertainment platform. They're a social platform. It's not the same. They can do
yeah.
that. Change what you want. we're in different categories. So they're never going to be able to be what we are, and we're never going to be able to be what they are. And what's amazing about TikTok's rise is that in a world of social platforms that kept trying to like outdo Facebook, a platform that was built on the social graph, and the social graph meaning your personal connections with friends and family and famous people. You can't beat a company that is built on a social graph because they have too many years of head start on you. So when you go on Facebook and it's like, here's what you did 8 years ago, that is indicative of all of the data they have on you and your relationship. So if you're a new social platform, you're like, hey, add your friends. Well, you're 10 years behind Facebook. TikTok was like, we're not going to play that game. We're going to invent a brand new algorithm, a discovery algorithm, the For You page. And so we're playing a game with totally different rules. So we don't have to worry about competing with TikTok. We're not on the same court. We invented a new sport. And so Facebook then trying to catch up, that's where you have TikTok in that article being like, well, they're playing a different game. So good luck.
Yeah, and I like how TikTok will pull like your local information, so it's like it's more likely for me to find
Yes.
people that are like close in my region, which is really cool, especially because like my church right now is trying really hard to like branch out and make partnerships with other local churches. So it's like we're gonna do like our church has like we're gonna do like a night of worship with another local church where we go there, our worship band plays, and we're trying to do like men's events together with this church and women's events with this church. And it's like it's been kind of cool to be on TikTok and see these other people from like my area that have the same kind of like beliefs. And then it's like, oh, that gives me now an opportunity. I could reach out to this person and like make an actual physical connection rather than like, oh, there's a guy in Canada that I really like, and but he's 8-hour drive away from me that I couldn't like really like connect with on that type of a personal level. So I think that that's the one thing that I do see TikTok having that none of the other platforms really have. I mean, even YouTube doesn't do that. Like with shorts, you can add tags and stuff like that. So, that kind of drives their algorithm for their SEO. But yeah, TikTok is still superior in that. Kind of talking about you and Alex talked about how you thought that Facebook was super bloated and there's like just 1,000 things you can do in there. Um, do you think, because my head was like, man, I would rather Facebook or Meta, I would rather them have like 7 apps so that like if I want this feature, I can go to the app from them that is all kind of congruent. Like when you get into Adobe, everything kind of feels the same. Where it's like if I want to look at vertical video, I'm just going to go to the Instagram app now. And if I want to share that to my Facebook so that everyone sees it because they're owned by the same company, it's really seamless to share that. Do you think that that's kind of what they're doing with the Instagram? Hey, we're not a photo app anymore. We're a video app now. Do you think that that's kind of what they're doing, or do you think they're just trying to diversify across all their platforms?
I think that both platforms are in a very difficult space where they have been the leaders on social, and it hasn't been close for about a decade. And during this massive shift in culture, they were the two platforms that then became owned by the same one that
Mhm.
basically had a stranglehold, a monopoly, if you will, on this new industry that captured the attention of not only young people, but the entire world. And out of that came so many new sub industries and careers and professions. And, you know, music now is a completely different industry because of what social did in the process of becoming popular.
Yeah.
And then what happens is eventually your run at the top ends, and now they're trying to pivot, and I don't think there's any easy answer to doing that well or even doing it successfully at all, especially when you're a publicly traded company.
Right.
Facebook had its first quarter of downturn in revenue like ever, and it was like this big, well, wave the white flag, like it's a
Surrender.
storm, play the terrible, like, okay, everyone get inside your house, tornadoes coming, play the, like, well, no, they just had an unprecedented run of like 10 years up into the right growth. Like there's no such thing as indefinite growth forever. That just isn't realistic. But when you're a publicly traded company, you don't have the luxury of like making strategic or value motivated decisions. There's only one value, and that is, did you return money to your shareholders this quarter? And so they have the in my mind, impossible task of trying to keep the money they've gained. So, like, oh, we make a bunch of money through Facebook ads. Well, if we pivot to Reels, we pivot to vertical video, which we feel like we need to do for the long term success of our platform. Well, how do we monetize that? And they're spending so much and testing so much to try and figure out how to do that. But they're hamstrung at the same time by they can't really take 2 steps back to take 3 steps forward. They can barely take a half step back. They did, and all these like press releases ran, all these think pieces, Facebook's done, right? So they're really between a rock and a hard place in that respect. It's like when you have a superstar in sports, and so much of it is based on like their athleticism, and then they're not in their 20s anymore. They're in their late 20s or early 30s, and they don't have their athleticism anymore. And I'm from Canada, about an hour outside of Toronto, and so it was really cool seeing Vince Carter go from like most famous basketball player in the world to having one of the longest careers in the history of basketball because he found a way to go from superstar to really useful role player. But the number of athletes that are able to go from like, I'm one of the best 5 people in the world at this out of 8 billion humans to I need to kind of play a back seat, spot minutes, just a supportive role. It's very, very difficult to do that. We're seeing that now at a much larger scale with these companies. And so, I mean, like realistically, the chance of them pulling it off is very, very low. And that's why, some of the best think pieces on this, I think, have described, okay, what happens if social media is no longer controlled by a monopoly? And what would be the fallout from that? And it's probably positive in almost all respects. But that won't make it any less disruptive as we go through it.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's good. I mean, the best thing they could do is add a search feature.
That would solve it.
I mean, I feel like it would. I mean, that's
Why don't
the
they bring
two
you in to
biggest.
consult? Clearly,
I mean, that's what I'm saying is like it's so simple. Like, I mean, come on, guys.
they're overthinking it.
I know. I mean, usually the best answer is always the simplest answer. Okay, so on the podcast, usually I exit with asking someone to give like a piece of advice, but I'm going to change that slightly. The name of the channel is Enhance, Don't Distract. And so I'm going to ask you, like, what can churches do to enhance what they're doing online and in person and not distract?
Well, I think if we were to measure something like that, we're trying to solve that problem. If we enhance something, that would mean that we are positioning ourselves in a way to better fulfill the mission. If we were going to distract, we'd basically be, hey, we're headed on this trajectory, distracting, suddenly we're on a different trajectory altogether. And so this happens on every single podcast, but I get to a point where I just say, like, what is your church trying to accomplish? And how are you measuring it? Because as simple as it sounds, the vast majority of churches are just kind of in the habit of doing church because it's what we do. And that's what happens when, cultural Christianity in the West is the norm. You don't necessarily think about why you do things. You just do them because, well, we've always done it. And that's the follow the leader trap. But it doesn't just happen in things like the online world that are newer and maybe senior leaders don't have too much experience with it. It can even happen in like the core sustainable rhythms of what we do and why we do. And it's easy to kind of, especially in a millennia old faith, it's very easy to kind of like fall into the practices that are so meaningful, but they actually start to lose their meaning because of how routine they are. It's like, when we do communion as a church, like if we're thinking enhance, don't distract with that. And I know that has nothing to do with digital, but we just did communion last week at my church. And the pastor, while doing communion, was acknowledging like, hey, it's easy for something like this to become routine. And if he wanted to distract from it, we could probably try to do something like really zany that would be novel. And oh, wow, I've never done communion like this. But does that actually truly enhance it just because it's novel? I mean, the whole point of that spiritual practice is like, it is the ancient rhythm of it that is what makes it so cool. So maybe you don't want to make it novel. And so enhance, don't distract comes down to, do you as an organization truly know your mission and your values, and how do you measure those things? The real big challenge in church is that there's no perfect or even maybe ideal way of measuring the existential matters that we deal with. Life change and discipleship and faith, those things are so personal only the person that's actually dealing with them truly knows how honest and deep they are. But we need to have something to measure that's better than just like say butts and seats at church, which if
Right.
that is kind of the unspoken or spoken ultimate metric in our churches, can I think lead to a lot of problematic decision making because it's not necessarily rooted in the mission of what we want to accomplish. It's too many degrees removed. And so, if I was to point your audience to any of our content that's most important, we have a YouTube video and a blog post called The New Rules for Church Growth, which is just a new system for how we measure what we do in church. It's not a promise that your church will grow. It's also maybe not the definition of church growth that a lot of us first think when we hear that. You could say the new rules for church health and just understanding how do we evaluate what's happening. As a leader in my organization, I find that one of my biggest challenges is making good decisions with imperfect information. And the better way to make good decisions is to first have better information. And so a lot of what we try to instruct and teach churches is like, okay, how are you evaluating what's going on? If you have a good system for evaluation, or at least the best system you can, considering what we dedicate our lives to, then you can start making better decisions because you have better information. And if you do that for a month, a year, 10 years, the difference in where your organization will be over the course of that decade, over where it would be if you're just kind of going off of emotion or going off of, well, we've always done it this way, the types of things that are not going to drive good decisions predictably and sustainably, the difference there is dramatic.
Yeah, I'm reading this book right now called Digitized, and it's about like technology and spiritual side of things. And in the first chapter, he breaks down and he starts talking about like the difference between information, knowledge, and wisdom. Like you can get information, but that doesn't mean you actually understand it, why it happened, how to use it. The knowledge is you know how to use it, and then the wisdom is choosing how to use that knowledge with the information. And it's kind of that trickle down effect of like being able to use all three of those. And you made a comment earlier, and Dave Ramsey does the same thing. He's like, some of the things that we do and we tell you to do goes against the grain in the thought process. Like the math doesn't work out, but we tell you because you can sleep at night when you have a paid off house. Yes, you could have used that money and made more money in the market, type thought process. It's counterintuitive, but, you know, being able to like go, okay, but the wisdom is not to do it this way because the outcome is better if we do it this way, even though it seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, a lot of times it's how are we doing things, and
Yeah.
the results, especially in the church world, like the results will be what they are. But can I be confident that the way I'm doing things, the way I'm making decisions, are they based in values? Are they consistent? That's what a good leader does, even when it is difficult. And then, hey, the results will be what they are, but then you can be proud of the effort that you put in because it was thoughtful and it was based in something bigger than yourself. And I love that about what we get to do, because whether it's family or it's personal health or it's work or it's parenting, uh, relationships, like Jesus came and gave us the perfect example. And so if the values that we choose to live by are inspired by Christ, then I can be happy with how things kind of like how the cards kind of fall. There's so
Yeah.
much that I can't control, but I can control that. And so if I stick to the values when things are getting difficult, end of the day, I'm proud of what I put in.
Yeah. No, that's great. Brady, thank you so much for coming on. I think, we've been here for about 50 minutes or so I think we should just wrap up. How can people find your podcasts? How can they ask you questions? All those kind of things.
Yes, if you just search my name, Brady Shearer, Shearer, like one who shears sheep, uh, you can find me on all the major platforms, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, probably the biggest ones. And then our podcast, if you are into that, is called the Pro Church Tools Show. You can just search my name again wherever you get your podcasts, it'll show up. And the format that we do for that show is kind of 4 questions from the audience each week with my co-host Alex, who Justin mentioned a couple of times. And it's a really fun format, casual, laid back. All the other stuff is very teachy and a little bit more formal and put together. So whatever you kind of like, we should have something that is your speed.
Cool. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate the invite.